So I just put that out there because we are frankly entering this most critical phase. And again, I appreciate that our staff got us to this point, so we're able to enter the conversation. I think entering the conversation is the right thing to do.
Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I acknowledge all the hard work that council members have done on this project, and I appreciate the work of the previous council before the new members were elected in 2014. My mind is really thinking about the future of this area and what this area is going to look like in 20 to 30 years, and who's going to be able to still have access to this particular region of our city. And so as we know, there's a lot of conversations happening right now about who gets to live in our city in the future, questions of affordability and access, renters' rights, questions around gentrification and small business owners and immigrant business owners being able to stay and retain the storefronts that they have occupied for many years. When people were disinvesting in our city, these folks were sacrificing and continuing to keep our streets active. And so as the city makes a move to have a more intentional and direct hand at redevelopment in this area, I want to encourage us to couple these conversations with initiatives on the council that can help to preserve and protect vulnerable populations that will be feeling the pressure from this new activity and investment to be priced out or to not have their hard work that they've invested in this area for a long time be valued and perhaps be overvalued by other initiatives. And so I want us to think about, how do we become the architects of racial equity in this area? How do we become the architects of affordability and accessibility in this area, so that in 20 to 30 years, when we do have an active transit station, and when perhaps we have a rail line going down the Greenway, and as many of you have noted already, as the development moves eastward on the Greenway in our city, how can we make sure that we're advocating for those populations, paying attention to them, and looking at policies and ordinances and programs that can really help us to protect those immigrant business owners that have made Eat Street what it is today, help the immigrant families who have established businesses and have sent kids to the schools in the area, and renters who live there now and who are feeling the pressures now of displacement. So I'm happy to support this effort today. I just really want to encourage us to also, at the same time, think about what we're doing to ensure that we're keeping our racial equity discussion alive and well in the city of Minneapolis.
Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a big vision with a huge result that could do quite a bit for the community. And due to that fact alone, I will most certainly be voting yes to allocate the $800,000 along with the $6 million. Now, I think it's important to then look at the result down the road too, because we've got our it's not 6 million, I apologize. It's 5.2 some odd million. But while I'm correcting the record, it was a $25 million public investment in Nicollet, not a $50 million public investment. The remaining $25 million came from assessments from businesses, but that's neither here nor there. So we're looking at the $5.2 million investment plus the $8 million investment, which is inclusive of the $800,000. But those two figures could ultimately pale in comparison to the price of buying, of taking over the lease. And so I just think it's necessary that we're cognizant of those two facts now, which will undoubtedly rear their head months or years from now. But that being said, I'm fully supportive of exercising the option. Although expensive, it's well worth it. I'm sorry, of entering the option.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'll move approval of the staff recommendation of the items listed by Mr. Frank, authorizing the purchase of 30 West Lake Street for $5.275 million pursuant to the attached purchase agreement closing on December 1st, 2015, authorizing the signing of a 2-year option agreement to purchase the lease fee estate of 10 West Lake Street for $8 million, subject to the contingencies pursuant and the terms described in the staff report, and passage of a resolution appropriating $6.275 million within the CPED budget to provide temporary funding for the actions as described above. And those are written on the agenda as well as the staff report. Further comments or questions? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved, and thank you very much for your report today. We'll move on to our remaining items, which are items 11 and 12. Ms. Shilquist, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Goodman, members of the committee. Sherry Shilquist from the Community Planning and Economic Development Department, here today to present to you the commercial garden policy recommendations and criteria for city-owned vacant properties to be considered for market gardens and urban farms. This is in response to a March 2015 committee direction taking into account the recommendations of the Homegrown Minneapolis Food Council, which included participation from Garden Matters, the Land Stewardship Project, Appetite for Change, and many others that are present here today. As you can see, the map shows that CPED has identified 47 additional properties to be considered for gardens. That brings the total to 110, if approved, garden properties, including 49 that are currently leased and 14 that are currently available. This represents commercial gardens being available in 3/4 of the wards of the city. As a background, there are 796 vacant lots currently in the CPED inventory. 388, nearly half of the inventory, are held for single-family development. 271 are held for multifamily development, business development, or other special projects. 83 have long-term leases, and 51 are side yard parcels. The criteria that we are recommending for a city-owned vacant property to be considered for market gardens and urban farms is broken down into 4 categories. Category A includes properties with conditions that pose marketing challenges, and category B includes multifamily housing or business development project properties that are not needed for site assemblage or being actively marketed for redevelopment or subject to a pending sale or have an exclusive development rights agreement. These category A and B properties may be made available for a garden lease term of 1 year. Category C are undersized properties that have no pending redevelopment activities. They may be made available for a garden lease term of 3 years. Category D are undevelopable properties, and they may be made available for a garden lease term of 5 years. All the leases may be renewed at the end of the lease term. The sale of undevelopable or undersized vacant parcels not needed for site assemblage to commercial gardeners is being recommended for consideration. Any vacant parcels added to the CPED inventory in the future may be considered eligible for garden lease without the need for full city council approval, provided that they meet these criteria. Of the proposed 47 properties, 20 properties come under the market challenge category. 4 come under the multifamily housing or business development property category. 23 are undersized properties, and at this time, no undevelopable properties are being recommended for inclusion in the community and commercial gardens. There are some recommended lease standards that are recommended for your consideration. That the liability insurance requirements for commercial gardens be $2 million. That the lease term is proposed as a fee of 5% of the fair rental market value of the property, or a sales price based on the fair market value of the property. The city also recommends an administrative fee of $25 and a refundable damage deposit of $250 in the case of leases. These modifications to the City of Minneapolis commercial garden policies, if adopted, will assist in further advancing strategies to improve the growing, processing, promotion, distribution, consumption, and composting of healthy, sustainable, locally grown foods in Minneapolis. And with that, we request authorization of the resolution and the adoption of the criteria and related actions to advance the commercial garden policy. I'd be willing to take further questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Sjoquist? Seeing none, I have 5 amendments that have been suggested to me by various members of the council. I'm going to start with Councilmember Reich's one amendment. They all seem fairly simple and self-explanatory, but we'll just start with Councilmember Reich's amendment, which is proposed in front of you as amendment number 11. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The properties listed here are adjacent or associated with the Lowry Avenue area, and that's a plan that we've developed with the county. We, of course, also have a community plan that calls out these areas being developed for high-density transitory development, and I would not want these to be taken off for that opportunity.
So I'll read out loud. This is to direct staff to hold back on the following properties from the commercial garden list: 914 19th Avenue Northeast, 966 Lowry Avenue Northeast, 719 Lowry Avenue Northeast, and 715 Lowry Avenue Northeast. Councilmember Reich has moved this as an amendment. Are there any comments or questions on his amendment? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment is approved. I have 4 amendments that have been suggested to me by Councilmember Yang. I want to note that Councilmember Yang has, if you put that map back up, the predominant benefit and burden of these lots in his ward, and I really appreciate his involvement in this conversation. I think he has a very high standard for moving forward in a way that the community really supports. So I'm going to note the amendments. They've been sent out in advance, and I'll note them here now. Amendment number 1 would be to strike the $250 refundable deposit damage from the lease agreement standard. The cost of returning the lease land or the conditions specified by the leasee shall be billed to the leaseholder if they do not fulfill the terms of the lease. And I'll have Councilmember Yang speak to any of these after I read them all. Amendment number 2 is to increase the administrative fee to $100. Amendment number 3 is to strike the 5% of fair market value for renting the lot and creating a flat fee of $150. And then also there's some language about that. The city will collect a commercial garden lease fee of $150 on all parcels leased for commercial gardens. The city will also collect an administrative fee of $100 in lieu of a damage deposit. So essentially, instead of a $250 deposit, a $250 lease fee, and a $25 administrative fee, which is about $550. Councilmember Yang's motion brings the total amount down to about $250 total, so a little less than half of what had been recommended. And then the last amendment, which is item number 4, is strike any mention of selling any lots for commercial gardens. With that, I will move all of Councilmember Yang's amendments and see if he would like to speak to them or anyone has any questions or comments on those. Councilmember Yang, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this issue of community gardens or commercial gardens, let me speak to commercial gardens first. It's an issue that is important to me because, as you pointed out, Ward 5 has over, I would say, about 150 empty lots. And, for myself, when I look at it, I think the prevailing thought is that for each of these lots, it costs the city $3,600 every single year to maintain. And so in Ward 5 alone, we're spending $500,000 every single year in terms of maintenance. And I think as government, we need to figure out a better way of doing it. And, with community gardens, however you feel about them, the great thing about them is that we actually, for every community garden that is taken, we actually take off $3,600 from us having to pay for maintenance. And I think that is the part that is important to me. In terms of getting folks there and gardening and taking care of the maintenance for us and us not having to pay, that's important. And, when you look at these amendments, to me, it's just a common sense way of just getting people access to land that is owned by us so that they can do a lot of the maintenance for us. And, however they approach this in terms of whether it's commercial or community, I mean, it's a good thing for us just because it saves us quite a bit of money. And I think, with regards to these amendments, I mean, that's really the approach that I'm taking in terms of how to do this. I mean, all the other good stuff with regards to healthy foods and all that stuff, I mean, that's great and all, but I mean, for myself, the prevailing thought is just that, if we can save ourselves money and do a good deed in the process, I mean, that's good for us. And so, I don't want to get too specific with regards to every single one of these, but I mean, for me, the important part is really just to, at the end of the day, save ourselves money.
So I just want to note, these are amendments to the commercial garden policy. I have 2 on the community garden policy, which also eliminates the deposit, as well as having just a $1 lease and the $100 administrative fee. I'll move that next. But these are the commercial garden policy amendments. Are there further comments or questions on Councilmember Yang's amendments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those amendments are approved. The main motion is in front of us, which is the commercial community garden policy with the Reich and Yang amendments included. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have just a couple of quick questions. I fully support the amendments that are brought forward. Thank you for that. I think it saves some administrative hassle on our end, and it also reduces some of the burdens for the commercial gardeners who want to gain access to that space. And that's really my question now is how would be marketing these availability of lease options?
Councilmember Quincy and Madam Chair, thank you. We do have Minneapolis Garden Matters and also CPED staff here today who are primarily responsible for the marketing and the leasing of these properties. We are planning to kick off on December 3rd the annual Homegrown Minneapolis campaign, and the staff that worked in advancing these recommendations is also working together to communicate the availability of these new properties, as well as the streamlining of the process and the timing to make the properties available for commercial gardens, market gardens, and urban farms.
Good. I just wanted to make sure we were highlighting that as a factor. This is not just setting a policy. We're actually wanting to see something happen in these, and we have those partnership arrangements in place that'll help draw interest to that. What would happen if there's competing applications for an individual parcel?
Councilmember Quincy, to be honest, we have not fully determined the procedure on that particular item as of yet. Although this is the commercial garden portion of the agenda, we do have a priority for community gardeners to receive a priority over the commercial. If there were, I believe we are leaning towards a first come, first serve within a identified time period for applications. So, for instance, if the community meeting is held in December, we will give people 2 months notice to get their applications together. We would have a time period for the applications to come in sometime in February. So by March, people would know what properties were available to them. That would be a first come, first serve. If there were not all the properties were leased at that time, then after that time period, it could be on a month-to-month basis. So we have some discussions, but we haven't nailed down the details.
Very good. Thank you very much.
We've been joined by Councilmember Gordon. I would invite you to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'm the council representative on the Minneapolis Food Council. And I just wanted to share with you that this has been a priority for the Food Council now for quite some time, how to improve land access and how to open up some more of these lots for growing, both for community gardens, but also for market gardens and for commercial growing. And I think that the Food Council will be very excited about many of these changes. I think that the security deposit being gone is significant. Some of these last amendments are great changes too. And also identifying the market value, it will be capped at $150. That'll make it clearer, and there'll be a much better expectation about what it's going to cost. I also just think in general, allowing more market gardeners to lease land in more lots is something that we really wanted. And chances are there'll be growers now who will be ready to come forward and do this and participate. I don't know that marketing is going to we'll have to market, we'll have to make sure people understand that, but I expect we'll have some people taking advantage of that. I was a little bit curious about why for the market gardens, why the insurance requirement is still $2 million. We don't have to talk about.
I can explain that to you.
Okay.
The city's tort liability cap is set at 1.5 million, so we're not willing to take any kind of risk on our tort liability cap. And insurance policies generally are in $1 million increments. So we had to choose one and take a $500,000 risk, or $2 million to make sure we were covered. And we made the determination from a risk management point of view that we were not going to leave ourselves open to a tort liability cap where we would potentially have to pay up to $500,000 if there was an injury or accident on one of these commercial garden plots.
Okay.
How's that for an explanation?
It sounds like an all right explanation, but it sounds like we're willing to take that risk on the community gardens maybe. So that's.
I can explain that
But-
why too offhand, but the intensity of the use, the fact that volunteers versus paid staff could be used, all increase risk. And so this has been reviewed by our folks on the risk management side. We think there's less risk with the community gardens than commercial growing operations. But I can increase it to 2 million on the community gardens as an alternative if you'd like. But I'm not willing to decrease it.
All right. Well, I just thought that I'd note that. I'm also working on something that I'll probably might bring up at the council as a possible amendment, because as you may recall, we passed a pollinator-friendly resolution saying with all city lands, we're going to try to have the best practices so that they don't harm pollinators. And I'm going to make sure that gets extended for these lots of city land that we're leasing, and haven't worked out the details on that amendment, but hopefully bringing something forward on the council. But really appreciate the work. I know that staff also looked at this for a long time and worked with our homegrown staff, and I appreciate all the effort and time that went into coming up with this and the amendments that have been made. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. So on the motion to approve the commercial community garden policy with the amendments as approved, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. On item number 12, there are two amendments. They follow in line. Half of them follow in line with the commercial garden policy, and this is to strike the refundable damage deposit completely and to substitute a $100 administrative fee. And then just to clarify, the lease for a community garden will be $1. So I will move those motions as suggested by Councilmember Yang. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the main motion, Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When the staff direction was provided over the summer, or even I think during this early spring, I think we anticipated some difficulty given that this was not a traditional action that we've had in government. I think sub-departments were confused as to who was working on what. This is a somewhat complex issue, but I'm 100% behind it. I think there's often the sentiment that by growing and farming land that is presently not used, we're somehow giving up on the area. And it was likened at times to Detroit. And I disagree more. This is the asset that a community garden or commercial garden brings to a neighborhood, I think, is substantial. It functions as a community gathering space as well as a health and wellness tool. And so the asks, just to look back on what the asks were and what's getting passed, I think on the whole we're very successful. The asks were expanding the number of parcels that were open to growing. And we had somewhere in the range of 770 some odd parcels that were vacant but presently not used. And in doing so, we wanted to expand the definition of what constitutes undevelopable land. And undevelopable doesn't only mean it's an oddly shaped parcel that inhibits a substantial development. It also means that perhaps it's in an area of town where the financial cost of putting up a new building far outweighs the benefit that you would get in return, and therefore nothing is going to get built. Not to mention there are many vacant properties with buildings on them right now, and those buildings should probably be refurbished before you then talk about building a new one. So that's the first piece. Second thing, we wanted to allow for lease to commercial gardens. That previously wasn't done. It's happening today. Third, we wanted to expand the lease term. Previously, it was 1 year for everything, and now we're expanding that in some cases to 5. I didn't anticipate decreasing the price tag, but I do think that that's a benefit at the end. It went from 500 to 250. Councilmember Goodman and I disagree slightly about. I thought it should have been a slightly more, but in the end, we are decreasing it to 250, and I think that's a very good result. That's what I meant. Correct. I thought the price tag should be slightly less. But in the end of the day, we're arguing over literally dollars. And I realize those dollars can be an impediment, especially when you only have a shovel in hand and a couple of seeds. But nonetheless, this is progress, and I am really proud that it's coming forward.
Anyone else? On the motion to approve item number 12 is amended, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. Then seeing no further business before us, we have one more business? I move that. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.